All right, good evening, everyone. It's time to get started. Welcome and namaste. Good evening and welcome to the third session of Gyaan Daan, a week of knowledge that we have curated at Development Consortium, which is a 5-day virtual series celebrating the joy of giving through knowledge. For 5 days, we are created 5 learning series, and today is the third in this 5-day series in which we are going to talk about taking our village to the world stage, elevating grassroots voices in global agendas. My name is Aarti Shukla. I am Director for Strategy at Development Consortium, and I will be moderating this panel today. And I will be very much ably supported in this by my colleague and CEO of Development Consortium, Anamika Srivastava. Today's session, as I mentioned, is titled From Local to Global, How Smaller NGOs Can Take Their Voices to National and Global Forums. Global platforms, whether it's the UN forums, SDG conferences.
दिक्कत आती है ये बिल्कुल चाहते हैं ये लोग कि बिल्कुल
I think we have somebody not on mute. Okay. So global platform, whether it's the UN forums, SDG conference, the climate conference, or even national level health or educational conference often refer to the work being done with communities at the grassroots, and very often by smaller and mid-sized NGOs like ours. But not all of us get a chance to tell our stories ourselves. Sometimes we don't know where to begin. Sometimes we don't know how to adapt our work to the formats of these forums. And sometimes we simply don't have the resources or know where to find them. So today, we want to explore practical ways for small NGOs to make sure their voices are heard and can resonate on national and global stages. Our expert panel will share their experiences, tips, and practical strategies on storytelling. I'll just wait. Can some of you read my
Hey, Aarti, just hold on. I think I'll try to mute the people. Give me 1 minute.
Yes. Okay, I'll give it a try now.
Go ahead now.
Thank you. So our expert panelists today will share their experiences, tips, and strategies on storytelling, how to create these partnerships, and how to navigate these global platforms effectively. And they will offer us actionable guidance, and which should work for organizations of all sizes. So with this, let me introduce the panelists. I am thrilled to have on the panel today with us. First up, Samya Ghosh. Samya is an Associative Creative Director at Purpose, where he uses design and storytelling to amplify community voices on issues like climate, health, and sustainable energy. He has helped grassroots stories reach global stages such as the New York Climate Week, working with partners like the UN, WHO, and UNICEF. He also teaches at IIT Delhi and integrates Buddhist philosophy into people-centered creative solutions addressing climate, health, and sustainability challenges. A warm welcome to our panel, Samya. Next up, we have I have to wait. Next up, we have Gargi Saha. Gargi is a seasoned child protection specialist with over 2 decades of experience across North and Central India and international humanitarian context. She's currently serving as the Child Protection Officer at UNICEF, Bihar, and she has previously led similar portfolios in Chhattisgarh and contributed to UNICEF's L3 emergency response in Ethiopia. Her work spans trafficking, child marriage, gender-based violence, and child protection in both developmental as well as crisis settings. A former Atlas Core Fellow at Ashoka Youth Venture in Washington, D.C., Gargi has represented India internationally, invited by the Scottish Police, US Embassy in Japan, and HEC Paris to share her work on human trafficking. So she was recognized among the 50 dynamic women in India by the US Embassy in New Delhi. So a perfect panelist to talk about what we really want to talk about today. Welcome, Gargi. And last but not the least, we have with us Vithika Yadav, who is a social entrepreneur with 2 decades of experience in gender and sexual rights. She co-founded Love Matters, India's first SRHR digital platform, and founded Teen Book for Adolescents. Her work has brought grassroots perspectives into global forums such as the ICFP and also numerous TED Talks. And she currently leads Designathon works, empowering children as change makers worldwide. So I look forward to the huge variety of perspectives that Vithika is going to bring to this conversation. Welcome, Vithika. A quick note on how our conversation will flow today. It will be done in 4 sections. First, we will have opening remarks from all of our 3 panelists. We will then open the moderated discussion in which we have 4 sections. Each section will begin with an audience poll on the topic, which will be done via Mentimeter. You will get an option to click on join Mentimeter via Zoom itself. And also you can click on the Mentimeter link that my colleague will provide. After the audience polls on that topic, we will invite and direct our question to specific panelists to reflect on the topic. And we will build the discussions on the results we get from the poll and audience, because the aim is to learn from each one of us. The poll will, as I shared, will be shared on Mentimeter, a link as well as on chat. I would also like to welcome our audience members to this panel. We would love to hear from you, so don't hold back, please. Please use the chat window to share your aha moments, quick thoughts, and reflections as our panelists speak. We will take your questions during the dedicated Q&A period at the end. So I request you all to put your questions on the chat. We will collect them and raise them to our panelists towards the end. And we will also give an opportunity to some of you who would like to ask questions directly, but we will moderate between the chat questions and the direct questions. But when you write your question on the chat, please make sure to write who is it for. And on that, we would like to get started. But before that, we would like to click a picture with all the panelists and our audience members today. So we'll switch off the PPT for a second, and we'd like you all to switch on your cameras and give us your brightest, best smile so that we can take a picture. So on the count of 3, just give me a nice smile and somebody in my comms team will click a picture. So do we have everybody's cameras on? Excellent. I can see so many smiling faces. On the count of 1, 2, 3, click. One more. 1, 2, 3, click. All right. Thank you. So let's get started with our conversation. So like I said, to kick off, I'd like each panelist to briefly share their experience in helping the organization that they work with or the organization they consult reach voices to global audiences. Please focus on sharing practical lessons and your first-hand experiences. So we'd like to start with you, Samya. And we want to ask you, how have you used design and storytelling at Purpose to bring local stories to international attention?
Yeah, sorry, I was unable to unmute. Okay, firstly, thank you so much, Aarti and Anamika, for having me on this panel. So what you've asked, Aarti, is something that the organization that I work for, Purpose, really sort of dives deep into. So Purpose is a social impact creative agency, and we specialize in making movements with communities around specific issue areas to sort of build a coherence around themes and the kind of changes that we want to bring through these campaigns. And design and storytelling kind of act as tools that help us translate some of the lived realities that we sort of see in the ground and with the communities and the audiences that we work with, and sort of translate that and takes it out of the geography or the geographical boundary that they have. Much of our work, whether it's about women farmers in Bihar, or even say people in Brazil, or the audience in Nigeria, the aim is actually to make sure these local struggles are globally visible, and the common conversations around justice, equity, sustainability all sort of come to light. There's a quote by Angela Davis that kind of I always get reminded about when we work on these. She said that we have to talk about liberating minds as well as liberating the society. And that's exactly what design and storytelling at their best can do. They kind of open minds, and they allow others to also see and feel what the audience or what the sort of grassroots level community is feeling, and also how to act. The move is to sort of make the audience connect with each other. And at Purpose, we kind of do it in three ways. So the first is whenever we design anything, the design is co-created. All our campaigns are co-created with the communities that are part of these campaigns who we are representing. One of the reasons is that we don't look at ourselves as experts. We look at ourselves as facilitators. Also to sort of encourage the inherent wisdom that some of these communities already carry. So how through their language, through their culture, through their lived experiences, we sort of enhance their stories and their voices and do it authentically, not as an outsider. The second is something which is really important is framing these sort of very hyper local realities under universal truths. So when say a woman in Rajasthan is challenging gender-based violence, or young people in Nairobi are demanding climate justice, these aren't isolated acts, and they shouldn't be looked at isolated acts, because their expressions are collective, and the longing for dignity and agency, all these things are universal, and they're very similar around the world. The struggles are very similar. But we also do not only look at these common similarities in sort of sense that, okay, these are similar themes that are emerging. We also look at the structural connections, and intersectionalities. I think that is something that's really important. When you talk about climate change, you're also at the same time talking about health. You're also at the same time talking about gender. You're also at the same time talking about communities and how a lot of the times the impacted community is at the forefront of the climate crisis, but they also have the burden to sometimes be the first movers to solve it, right? Say when we talk about solar energy, a lot of the times the burden on uptake of these solar energies are also at the grassroots farmers. So how you look at these structural connections and how we can really have a framework that sort of allows us to think that these issues are together, and you kind of organize these things together. And design and storytelling is something that really helps build these sort of frameworks where you can spot these tensions and these linkages around the globe and say that, okay, what's happening in my own community is not an isolated event. It's something that can be seen globally, and it can be expressed in a way that a global audience understands it. And the third is by bridging sort of culture and the power of storytelling in various formats. At Purpose, we sort of use different storytelling formats like art, films, digital media, public installations that sort of carry these voices across different forums, for example, COP or any of the other UN forums, because art inherently also helps break barriers, because it's such a visceral sort of medium that you kind of feel the impact directly. And that's why we like sort of emphasizing on how you can utilize artistic practices also culturally, locally, sort of sourced, and use them to sort of do the storytelling. Now, there are many instances of this happening in all across our projects, but there's one particular project that I kind of quickly wanted to chat about. That's the WCC project, which is Women's Climate Collective. So the aim of this project was to kind of have um, a sort of group of women coming together to sort of build a climate movement around sort of feminist ideologies, as well as making it very sort of specific to the grassroots sort of women who are doing already incredible work. And how do you sort of make these connect together and sort of become a larger sort of cohesive narrative? So through WCC, what we did was we tried to provide mentorship, media visibility, and a lot of training sessions through, again, art and culture, to talk about their stories more confidently and on their sort of own terms. And that really changed everything. There is a particular example that I can sort of take from a group of women who are part of WCC. Hina Saifi, she comes from Uttar Pradesh, and she went from like running a very local sort of sustainable project to speaking at COP29 and collaborating with UNICEF, and even being named a climate warrior by CNN News. So there are, again, various other sort of examples where the way we sort of got the group of women to come together under the same sort of narrative, the same sort of storytelling, and giving them the kind of platform that they could sort of amplify their work. I think that was something that really helped WCC become like a bridge between this local and global, and have like everyday stories featured on these international platforms. Because at the end of the day, like the movements that you see around you, they don't happen by chance, and they don't travel by chance. They travel through the stories that we tell. So when we take Grassroots Voices to global stages, the work is not only about amplification, it's also about building continuity through the struggles and reminding the global audience that, like creativity, change also happens when there's a collective movement. So yeah, that's the way that purpose and the work that we do kind of harnesses the power of design and storytelling and creative thinking to sort of have these frameworks go through all our projects.
Thank you so much, Samya. You built such a basically the argument that you have made around sort of a global and a connected world, and how the stories that we are telling about sort of hyper local realities resonate globally, and the more of these connections we can establish in our communication, the more chances are of them resonating and of them being heard. And I really like the example that you gave of the WCC bridge that helped somebody from the grassroots to tell their story at COP. So thank you so much for a very power-packed opening remarks, and sort of reminding us that none of these things are happening in isolation. And that is the key to taking these stories globally. Thank you, Samya. We move to Vithika next. Vithika, you've worked across sort of topics and sort of across communities, across subjects, and across a wide variety of sort of beneficiaries and stakeholders. So between these sort of years, what strategies have worked for you in taking the narratives of the work that you were or your organization were doing at the grassroots to global forums, to international platforms? What worked and what are those strategies?
You are
Vithika, we can't hear you yet. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So I will probably also not shy away from talking about what really the problem is, because having spent so many years in this sector, I do think I was very lucky because I was deeply connected to ground realities since I started my work in the anti-slavery sector. I was working alongside community-based organizations who were directly confronting the toughest challenges. And, in those early years, almost all major conferences or international forums are almost exclusively dominated by big, large organizations. Well, actually, organizations were proficient in polished English presentations, to be honest. This is not to say that their role has not been important, but this is what it was. These spaces were kind of quite exclusive to bigger organizations, larger organizations, and language was a barrier. Small organizations, the grassroots voices were sidelined due to, I think there was a systemic divide because of language and resources. And I'm so glad that this point around mentorship has been brought up by Samya already, because I'm really the product of good mentorship and the support that I received from my mentors. And the guidance that I had from some of my mentors, especially from my work with Free the Slaves globally, which was an international organization, and it consistently advocated for grassroots representation on global stages, was one of the very few organizations who was doing that. And I can actually say, because Free the Slaves is a sister organization of Anti-Slavery International, which is the first human rights organization of the world. So their efforts were ensuring that community groups don't just have a seat at the table, but their stories, are at the center of the conversation. And it was very hard. It was very hard because, with grassroots groups, it was about understanding their limitations. It was also understanding their inhibitions. Most of the teams working in the grassroots groups, community-based organizations, did not even have basic documentation skills or computer skills. The resources, was a huge problem. But for organizations to come to be there and build the capacity of local organizations with the confidence that, you need to share your story in whichever format that works best for you. You have a role to play, and we have a role to play in terms of how we bring out these stories. And we do not take the limelight away, but how do we kind of manage that? So I remember, we did the Freedom Awards in LA back in 2008, where we brought together grassroots groups from all over the world, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, to a global stage, recognizing their work. These were very, very small grassroots organizations from different parts of the world. Then I think it was something that I recognized was important, in terms of the role that I was playing, because I sort of was somewhere a link between these bigger forums and bigger organizations to the work that the grassroots organizations were doing. So every opportunity that I got, I thought it was important to somehow bring these voices on the table. So when I got a chance to create a series for MTV, which was called Traffic, I brought out the grassroots anti-trafficking stories to a national youth audience, making their stories, making their work, their realities visible, which was sort of also different from the traditional conferences. Likewise, the program for All India Radio, where the world wanted to talk about bonded labor issues, but how do you understand the issue? And how do you bring that issue, in front of such a diverse audience if you're not bringing these narratives out from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, where the work was focused, and giving them a platform, giving the leaders of those community groups, the organizations, to talk about their experiences, to talk about experiences in their language, in the formats that was most accessible to even the local people there, because it was not just about stories that are going out, but it was also about what impact would these stories have as a result of what was being put out. I think Aarti, you would remember the experiment that we did, and a successful one with Mobikar, which was also an intention of how do we work with young people at grassroots level, and with the intention that they are able to understand how to create their own content about their own issues, about their own communities, and really put it out there for the world to see, to hear. And also linked to that was their aspiration, because they wanted to be heard. They wanted to, to present their work in their own voice, in their own words. At Designathon Works, again, we are working in 50 countries globally, and including some of the most remote and under-resourced areas, working with grassroots organizations, where we are trying to work with them to bring spaces for innovation in really resource-scarce settings. What would be the local impact and how to link it to the wider audience. And the core of our strategy really has been is been mentoring, has been capacity building. And really to see that, when opportunities come, how are these local organizations going to use that opportunity to showcase their outcomes, showcase the impact that they're having, both locally and as well as giving them the platform to do so internationally. So I think just expecting, I think the problem really is to understand that there has been a systemic divide, unfortunately, and we know that there have been severe, several pathways of breaking down these barriers, but expecting grassroots groups to conform to sort of a polished or a fancy presentation, it often overlooks the richness and the power of lived experiences, and also undermines the authenticity. So building storytelling skills is crucial, but also it is important that you build, the capacity of it is our responsibility as the space that we are in to help and support partners at the grassroots level articulate their impact and their values, their stories. It is important for us to not expect that every group of people that we work with would be professional speakers. Not everybody is out there to give a TED talk. So we need to change the way we consume content, our approach to consuming the impact of the work that we want to see. And true engagement really would mean that the grassroots groups and representatives have to speak as themselves, whichever language, whichever format that works for them. And yes, of course, guide them, because it is also important that they receive the guidance that can help them and support them. But ensuring the diversity of perspective is put in practice is extremely important. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Vithika, and thank you for flagging sort of the big elephant in the room, which is the systematic divide, which is being caused by both language and systems. And I think the easiest, the clearest pathway towards that is getting good mentorship and sort of who will help build skills, bridge the gap in capacity building, and build that confidence that is needed. And last but not the least, the point that you made about not losing the richness of voice and the powerful narratives in trying to make something work for a global audience. So keeping that balance is very important. So thank you so much. Let me bring Gargi into the conversation. Gargi, your opening remarks, please, on what advice would you give to NGOs on the partnerships they need to build or advocacy strategies they need to have to make their work visible at global or even national forums?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Aarti, and it was such a pleasure to listen to Samya and Vithika. I'll just start with my experience very quickly and then get on to the strategies, or because having worked, I started my career in Delhi actually, and till then I did not even know how or what rural India looked like. But even when in Delhi with Childline, I was actually at the forefront of rescue missions and taking the child, actually rescuing the child or children, groups of children, whether it is from a kind of a trafficking racket or someone's home in a South Delhi location in Lajpat Nagar, the taking the child or the children to the to get the medical done, running to AIMS, to producing the children to the magistrate or the Tis Hazari court, and then actually being with the child or the group of children until the follow up or the rehabilitation restoration is done. Now, having worked in Delhi, which is actually the destination point, because I have done a lot of work on trafficking, human trafficking, child trafficking, and then so having worked at the destination point, of course, with NGOs, because I was working with Prayas, my first organization, and then I moved on to Childline India Foundation. So even when I was with Prayas, I was working with 5 NGOs, the Childline NGOs, Sanam Balak Trust, Butterflies, Don Bosco, Delhi Brotherhood Society. And then when I went on to Childline India Foundation, I was looking at, 5 cities actually, and again working with groups of NGOs who are Childline partners, or even partnering, getting those partners on board. Now I'm drawing that experience, and now I'm with UNICEF for the past 14 years, with in Chhattisgarh, which was a conflict affected state, and now in Bihar. I think everyone knows that's the poorest state, most marginalized children live here, and I mean, you name the problem, and it's there in Bihar, whether it's patriarchy, whether it's gender based violence, whether it is casteism, whether it is I mean, it's like I just can say that it's like a huge pandora of all kinds of issues. So, but I mean, I have worked with NGOs like 20 years before and now, and I see a sea change in the way NGOs are looked at, and that's the reason I would really like to advise or whatever suggest, to my NGO counterparts, that it's very important to build your own, it's very, very important, because the most powerful stories, whether I was with Childline or whether I am with UNICEF in Bihar or in Chhattisgarh, which are the source points, so I know this linkage where the children are coming from, because Bihar is like the largest source states. We supply children and adolescents and even elderly people as labor across the nation. And the most evident example was during COVID, where our government also did not know the magnitude of how many children, adolescents and their parents were there in other states for work, for forced labor, bonded labor, all that. But the difference that I see from where, like for example, in the early 2000s, 2004, 5, 6, 7, in the era that I started working, and now I see a huge change because of political reasons, because of external factors, cost reduction, all of that. So what's happening is that, and all, but like if you ask me, I still feel that there's a huge kind of a opportunity for NGOs, because there's nothing that can beat or that can replace civil society. The power of civil society organizations, because you are there actually working on the ground. You are the ones who are working, you are the ones who are dealing on a day to day basis. So no one knows better, whether it is the context, whether it is a conflict context, whether it is a other kind of issues. Best knowledge you should be having, but you need to build your authenticity. And how do you do that? You need to gain the trust or regain the trust, because if I talk, like, even from my experience, if I talk about the recent one in Chhattisgarh versus Bihar, I also find a huge difference, because in Chhattisgarh, for me also as a UNICEF personnel, it was much easier to approach the state administration, district administration. It was a new state, it's a tribal state. But when I come to Bihar, now in Bihar, I see that there's a lot of distrust, mistrust, thanks to, I mean, unfortunate incidents like the Muzaffarpur rape case, if most of you know about that. And I actually joined Bihar when that case happened, when 44 girl children were being raped by a NGO personnel who was, a man in his like late 50s or early 60s, and he was running an NGO. Okay, not one NGO, he was running 6 NGOs. And imagine the impact or the adverse impact this one case had on the entire state of Bihar, the entire poor NGO forums. And imagine the bigger NGOs are suffering in Bihar. I mean NGOs like national, international NGOs like Save the Children, etc., etc. So imagine the kind of problems that the smaller NGOs. I can't even go to that, because because there was a huge, okay, so there was a huge this trust issue and all that. But then coming to the strategies, I really feel that you need to build on your work, build on your stories. Even one story can be so powerful. And I'm taking an example from my very recent work from Udaan. Udaan is a program we are doing in 22 districts with the most marginalized Mahadalit group of girls and boys. And Udaan has shown us that what is just impossible is actually made possible. I mean, we have 2 youth advocates from Udaan who have represented in the UN forum in Geneva, and one has just been selected in entire India. She's the only girl who's selected from Bihar. And imagine, she comes from from a block called Tekari in Gaya. So she must be the only one who has gone to the next level of even studies or completing class 12th and appearing for NEET exam. So these are the cases which give us so much of kind of this thing. But yes, you need to be AI, nowadays you have to be IT proficient, AI. So we are actually instilling a lot of these skills, 21st century skills, to these most marginalized groups of young people, because we work with only the the government schools, so you can imagine in these most marginalized areas. But I see a lot of potential is in these young people, and I really feel that if these grassroots level organizations, if they can direct and if they can mentor their beneficiaries well, we have a long way to go. And of course they need to join hands with organizations like UN, the district administration, the state administration, and just project their work through documentation and evidence generation. So thank you so much for now.
Thank you so much, Gargi, and for a very powerful reminder to the smaller NGOs that the actual story is with them. No one knows it better. And it is those stories that will take them to global platforms. It's just that they need to build the skills to tell those stories and build the partnerships, like you just mentioned, with international bodies or even governments, and develop the skills that you said you are organizations like yours are developing to be able to help the smaller NGOs to tell these stories. So with that powerful reminder, I'd like to move us on to our next section. But before I move to the next section, which is a moderated chat, and I will bring specific questions to various panelists, we want to bring in the audience here. And we want to check with our audience, what do you think is the biggest challenge for smaller NGOs or grassroots narratives to reach national or global platforms? Is it lack of partnerships? Is it lack of storytelling, funding, lack of networks, or simply not knowing how to do it? So this question is coming up for you on the Mentimeter. You would have got a notice on your Zoom to click join and reply on Mentimeter. And you will also get a link on the chat. So please use the button to join Mentimeter and vote, or click the link on the chat, and we will see what do you think is the biggest challenge in reaching for smaller NGOs to reach global and national platforms. What do you think is the reason? We started getting the results. Priyanka, can we also have the link? We also have the link on the chat now. You can vote also going on the link. So we have a lot more votes coming in. So I think lack of relevant network is coming clearly as the biggest challenge. And you would assume that it was the lack of funds that would be considered as the most immediate roadblock. But as we understand that fundraising is something the sector knows, but it seems to be the lack of relevant network that seems to be the biggest roadblock. So while you continue to vote, let me bring in all our panelists, Samya, Vithika, and Gargi, for a very sort of specific question. And I'd like your brief inputs on that. What do you think is the first step for a small NGO? What do you think is the first step they should take if they want to get noticed on global or national platforms? So I think lack of networks has come up as an issue, and lack of relevant partnerships have come up as an issue. But so keeping that in mind, keeping the results that you've just seen in mind, I would like you all to come in briefly on what do you think is the first step a smaller NGO should take according to you. Let me bring in Vithika first this time. Vithika, what is that first step according to you?
Okay, sorry about this mute, unmute. Well, I think Gargi already made that point. Teaming up locally, building local partnerships to begin with. Start small. Start with local partnerships. Team up with, the journalists, local journalists, youth media, digital volunteers who can really help translate their experience and their stories into formats that can resonate with people both nationally and globally. And that is possible now given the world we are living in, and you know that you can find those resources at different levels also. And documenting everyday stories from the field and sharing them through accessible, simple formats, photo series, short videos, audio clips, so people can have a sense of the community and the work that is being done, and really putting it out on social media, I think is great. And again, the idea is what is possible within the limited resources that the organization has. You don't need to have fancy cameras and video cameras and stuff. You need to have a smartphone, which is possible, with at a local level. You can build local partnerships, and I think coalitions traditionally have been the only way grassroots representation on some forums has been made possible, more like on a local level and a regional level. So think of those coalitions. What are those coalitions and networks that you can join so that you do not feel like you're alone and pushing for space at conferences and forums? Because if you're able to highlight your work within those coalitions, it is highly likely that through that coalition, your work would also be is likely to be presented on other forums. And yes, I mean, lastly, of course, investing in some form and capacity would be very, very important when you're working on budgets. Be very clear with the donors that you need to invest in capacity building for communications training for team members, and consider it as an important core function. I think it's more about teaching the traditional donors about why this is important. And the more people advocate for it, the more donors will understand. I mean, the donors are also from a certain generation who need to understand that things have moved and changed. So, thanks.
Thank you, Vithika, for not only sharing one tip, but 4 power-packed tips, and including things about like starting small and local and using local journalists, local influencers to be able to tell your stories. They have the skills, you have the stories. Then giving a sense of to the outside world of the work you have already done, and then highlighting them through coalitions, and finally building this in the budgets, because that is where one of the challenges lies. Thank you so much, Vithika. I'd like to bring Samya in on this now. Samya, what are the first steps according to you? Yes.
Yeah. I think I'll build upon what Vithika said about using social media. I think social media currently has sort of brought the ceiling down for people to tell their stories again more effectively. And at the same time, looking at stories and designing storytelling beyond just like its aesthetic value. Because in its core, design kind of democratizes the sort of process, so that you can be authentic, you can use sort of formats that are quicker to produce. Like Vithika said, you don't need fancy cameras, you don't need a content creation team. Just putting your work out there in its most authentic manner, I think that's the best way. Because when you go and speak for partnerships, just having a platform where you can say that, hey, look, this is the kind of work that we are doing, becomes really important. And also using, again, hyper local sort of influencers, looking at what your audience connects with, right? Like if you are an NGO, say in Bihar, then look at the kind of local the local system of content creators and how they are sort of leveraging these platforms, and kind of collaborating with them first, and then sort of building it out, and then sort of doing a few rounds of discussions and pitches to larger partners and larger NGOs or sort of organizations that can then take your work and build upon it, or sort of do some sort of a partnership together. And even with the coming of AI, I think AI also sort of, on one sense, of course, it's very, very problematic. But on the other end, it kind of also brings down the ceiling even further down, and the entry has become even easier for people to sort of create content. So I think that's one place, and we've seen audience.
Thank you very much, Samya. And sort of leveraging with the local system of storytelling, local system of influence is something that I think is coming across as a theme in our conversation. And what may be considered as just out there social media, just as frivolous, is the power that the change makers can use in their communication. So thank you, Samya, for that. Gargi, your quick take on where to start. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would just like to, talk about a bit more on the local level. I think, we have these district level task forces on child labor, child marriage, So, and these are very good platforms for these NGOs to, have a kind of a dialogue with the district administration, and of course, through show their worth through their work on the ground. And also, the government of Bihar, I was just attending a conference recently at the state level where the education department minister, an ex-IPS officer, he partnered a tripartite agreement with these smaller NGOs, also with CSR organizations. And these are, of course, non-financial. But then these does not prevent the NGOs to, portray their work. And once you are seen, you are visible, you come across as an authentic organizations, it will, I also never consider fund as a issue. And I would just like very quickly cite an example where this girl called Roshni Parveen from the most marginalized minority community in Kishanganj. She was one of our block coordinators, and just because of, and she has a history of gender-based violence. When she was 12, she got married to a 45-year-old man. She has a child. All of that. To cut the long story short, now she's running her own NGO, and she started without any fund. She's already represented globally, twice, and she's trying to build on her work and get the support of the district administration. At the same time, she keeps in touch with us at UN, so we are also always providing her platform. So then she is also getting a lot of visibility within the state. So this a real example that I wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you, Gargi, for bringing a real example, because also kind of builds confidence and hope that we can also do it, and there are practical pathways to take that up. That moves us nicely into the next section, which focuses on storytelling in communication. We have heard from Samya, Vithika, and Gargi on how to tell how to tell these compelling stories, and we've got some tips on that already. But before I ask the next specific question to Samya and Vithika, given your background in sort of digital storytelling and offline storytelling, I want to ask our audiences, if you could use just one sentence to share your NGO's impact. So basically, you have to tell your story in just one sentence. What would that sentence look like? And I would then like Samya and Vithika to reflect on the fact that what is the starting point to think about creating compelling stories? So that's your question, Samya and Vithika, but I will just wait for audience to reflect to see how they see themselves and what stories do they tell. So all of you have to just do a simple thing. You can click Menti by joining again on the message that you would have got, or by typing on the chat. If you could just use one sentence to share your nonprofit organization's impact at a global forum, what would that be? What would you say in one sentence? It looks like a tough assignment to be given in the middle of a webinar. Okay, we have some answers coming in. I think it may take our audience some time to think about this input, so we will keep this Mentimeter on. But I'll invite our panelists to start reflecting on this. What is that one thing that more things are coming up? Haisho ke pank, I like that one. In which they can make their storytelling compelling. So if you can come in with your brief takes on that, Samya and Vithika, and this time let's start with Samya.
Thanks, Aarti. Yeah, I think there are a few things that sort of constitute how you can create compelling narratives or storytelling. But I think everything kind of begins with the person in the middle, the human in question. I think we need to look at that while great stories can sometimes come from situations or data, but it needs to be humanized. There has to be a person at the center of it, and that's how you kind of can make people care about certain things. Because when you're writing a story or like creating a story, you're not just sort of writing for exposure, you're also creating like an entry point for the audience to connect with that story, to connect with the human who's central to that story, and to come at it with empathy and sort of emotional understanding of what's happening. So I think humanizing stories is really important, because again, I think in the industry there's a lot of talk around using data to leverage narratives and things. Data can inform, but data never moves people. Only compelling, humanizing stories move people. So I think that's the main sort of hook that, again, through our work, we also try and always look at and sort of build an emotional connection with the audience.
Thank you, Samya. So I love the sentences. Data can inform, but it doesn't move people. And that is something we have to keep in mind while building compelling narratives. Vithika, we see a lot of empowerment on the Mentimeter. Just bringing your thought into is like, how can we stand out? How can we tell something which is compelling and people can take notice?
I mean, I completely agree with what Samya has already shared, but I would just say, hamari kahani, hamari zubani. You have to own it. You just have to own it. You have to display that confidence. You should never, I mean, I do not want, I really wish like grassroots organizations, and Gargi already said it, you know best. You know the work best. There's nobody better than you to share the story. So they have to own it. They have to own the stage, and they have to get out there and speak for themselves.
Is there any example that comes to your mind where when an organization totally owned their campaign, they like really, and I know I'm putting you all on spot, so maybe you can come to me in the next answer where you can think about it. But I'd love for all of you to share that one grassroots storytelling that you remember did what you have just mentioned. But I'll leave that question with you and I'll come back to you. But that, so thank you so much, Vithika and Samya, to kind of make that point very strongly that जो हमारी कहानी है, वो उसको जैसे अभी I just wanted to say that we all probably do a lot of strong work, but we try and fit them into the narratives of empowerment, and then we lose that special sort of uniqueness that our story might have had. So through what we saw on the Menti and through your sort of spotlighting the fact that we need to own our narrative. So thank you very much. That moves us along to the next section. And again, I would like to bring again our audience. And here we would want to talk about partnerships and collaborations. And I would want to bring Vithika and Gargi into this discussion. But as we've been doing with each section, before we talk about how to build relevant partnerships and collaborations, I want to ask our audience, and this is a ranking poll. What do our audience think? Which type of partnership do they think would help your NGO most in reaching global platforms? Is it donors, philanthropy? Is it media? Is it other NGO coalitions? Is it government, international organization? Collaborating or partnership with which of these do you think would help you get onto global platforms? The link is on the chat now, and you can join the Mentimeter and also respond. Right, we have a lot of responses on the screen now. And it is changing hands pretty quickly, like, right. So I'm glad to see that there is a belief that there needs to be a relationship with all stakeholders in the ecosystem, and there isn't anybody who's sort of ranking very poorly, because probably it's a combination of these networks and partnerships. So keeping this 20 on the screen, I wanted to ask Vithika and Gargi, what can NGOs do to make sure they can leverage into any of these partnerships or coalitions to reach global stages? And any examples of effective partnerships that come to your mind? And Gargi, we could like to start with you this time. Yeah.
Sorry, Artik, could you repeat, because I was answering to someone Yanta's query.
Right, right. So basically, we have sort of listed on our Menti the kind of partnerships NGOs think they need to have, and there supposed to be a healthy balance, and everyone's thinking this can to be a sort of mix and match of all kinds of relationships. So the question too is that how can small NGOs sort of leverage these networks to reach global platforms? What can they do? What kind of relationships, or what would be your tips on building these relationships to be able to tell their stories globally?
Okay, so a few things I had already mentioned, and I would, come back again on this whole thing of a tripartite kind of agreement. Because what happens is that, many a times, and I understand the NGOs because I've worked, like I said, I started with an NGO myself. So the problem is that many times the UN or these so-called the big, whatever bodies, they don't they are not very accessible. I mean, for me also, it was not accessible. I would, when I was in Delhi and I was with Childline, I would keep thinking, who are these UN organizations? What kind of people even sit inside? Because I would not even meet them, right? So for me, it was completely inaccessible. So what you need to do is that, because at the grassroots level, it is much easier, in the sense that you can actually approach them. Like I said, that some of these even individuals, you have to be in touch, you have to communicate, even if it is sharing through WhatsApp, even if it is sharing your story through social media, like Vithika and Samya already mentioned. You have to keep in touch with the UN agencies, even if it is few individuals, one or two individuals, because what happens is that we also keep forgetting. So for example, if some organization, NGO, keeps in touch and sharing his or her work, so we also think that, no, I mean, this NGO or the person, seems to be authentic, or, through the kind of work, or when we see on social media. And then if there are even smaller NGOs, so I would use an example. It's called CCHT. It's a coalition of human trafficking organizations we built on the ground in Bihar, of the very, very smaller grassroots level organizations who are, working, but they are not visible, they are not seen. So what we did was that we tried to, have a tripartite this thing agreement with the so-called few larger NGOs, and through them, we were giving them funds, and then that would go directly to, to the smaller organizations, because even as UN's, UN has a mandate, we really need to be there for the smaller organizations as well. But like I said, because of cost cutting and all, and I would give another example. When I was in Chhattisgarh, and it is, for myself, it's an unbelievable example, and I'm so glad I did it, because there were, when I joined, there was this one district from where 40,000 girls were missing. They were all trafficked to Delhi and NCR region. It's called Jashpur, and it's bordering with Jharkhand. So then, when I went, my CFO, I mean the chief, she gave me an opportunity. She said, you have just one day in hand. You go to that district, you find out what's the issue, this, that. So imagine, it was a huge political nexus, and girls were being trafficked and all that. So I met some of these individuals who were missionary organizations, sisters, okay, and they were operating in fear. I mean, they had such small setups, no fund or very little fund, but I could see that they are very, very committed, and things like that. So I actually fought internally within my organization because I was bringing a revolution by getting partnerships done with these organizations who did not even have any, history or background of like really working formally, documentation, or things like that. And I'm so glad to say that from 4,000 US dollars, we went on like 150, 200,000 US dollar. So you can imagine, like I built like 3 such partnerships on the ground. And I am so happy to say that that very organization, Sister Annie, she runs JJVS, Janjagran Sansthan, not me, not Gargi Saha from UNICEF, but she got an opportunity to represent UN at NH, the New York headquarters, and she was also awarded by the Prime Minister President on 8th of March, International Women's Day 2018. So I'm just trying to say that what is the possibility. So please don't consider yourself small, or that, oh, I am still, like Vithika said, I feel being in Bihar, language is a huge constraint. So I am very happy and pleasantly surprised that we have NGOs here who can at least understand English, and we are talking in English, so which means, you are so much more in that sense above the, the kind of organizations that I am talking about. So so thanks so much, Aarti.
Thank you, Gargi, for first of all saying that you are the work that you do and you are not small because of the work that you do in any case. And the first basic step is to communicate what you're doing, keeping in touch, keep sharing your stories with everybody who's there in your network without feeling shy or without thinking that I'm small who would want to learn my story. So thank you, Gargi, for that very powerful message. Vithika, your take on what are some of the things that NGOs can do to build these partnerships?
So, I mean, what I have to add to what Gargi has already shared is that you need to map your partners. Map your partners. Find out people like Gargi across partnerships, across forums. There are people who are, who would be your strongest allies and advocates and would want to leverage their position in organizations to give you, to give you the support that is needed to identify what kind of support might be needed for organizations to be visible. So I do think mapping your partnerships, what the ecosystem really looks like, is very important. And to be able to do that, locally, leveraging whatever pathways you have. You might have a local radio station, IVRS service, whatever digital social media platform. Share your stories, share what you're doing, share in offline settings. Speak to the local authorities there. Try and get to different people within the organization. Even if you think this is inaccessible, nobody wants to listen to me. I mean, and something that we all know is that you have to also understand that you have to be at it. You cannot feel dejected and you cannot feel like nobody's really listening to us. I mean, most of us sitting here probably write 200 applications in a year, and what comes out of it is like 5 applications, right? So we know that the struggle is real and we have to make our work visible. So be at it, but map your partners, because when you map it, you know exactly how do you want to reach that partner and what value do you want to bring out of those partnerships from a local level to a national level to a global level. What is it that you want? And I think that exercise in itself is extremely important.
Thank you, Vithika, for the very practical, very doable tip that I think all of us could start with, because we do tend to be haphazard about our communication. And when something happens, we want to join that forum, we want to do that, but we haven't done the sort of homework that we should have done to build those relationships and build those partnerships. And mapping these is the first step that we can do towards this homework. So thank you so much, Vithika, for such a very practical advice that all of us could take up. So that brings me to my section 4, and here we talk about a little about the crunch or the funds or the resources that almost NGOs talk about. And I'll bring up our last Mentimeter for the day here. And I want the organizations that are participating to tell us what they think is the biggest roadblock, according to them, in reaching national and global platforms. So the question on the Mentimeters, which you can respond to by either clicking on join or by clicking on the link. If you had to attend a global forum tomorrow, what would you most need support? So we have answers coming up on our screen now. And I think the networking access remains a theme, as we saw in the previous slides. And I think Vithika has just given us a very hot tip on starting to build that network. But as our audience responds, I want to now come back to all our participants for their very quick take, a minute take, and then we move into audience Q&A, is that NGOs often have limited resources. So what, according to you, could be that one low-cost approach? And you already spoken about some of the low-cost approaches, but here, if you had to boil down to one, what could be a low-cost approach that can help NGOs sort of take their steps towards participating in global or national events? So let me bring in Samya first on what that approach could be.
I think it's of course quite a tricky tricky question to sort of narrow down on one aspect. But I feel that I think being aware of like the events or the sort of things that are happening again in and around your geography to begin with is a good step to at least start having like in-person physical networks that you can leverage later on. I think again the internet is a great source of knowledge for that. Having an idea of, okay, there's a small sort of a build up to COP, say, happening in a XYZ location in my city, or a city that we can travel to quickly. Or there's a online session on Zoom that's happening that I can attend and at least get an exposure to what are the emerging themes for some of the larger forums this year. Again, each year, New York Climate Week, COP, all these have an overarching theme. So once you kind of start knowing those, you can also align yourself with those themes and see if there are things that you can do with your NGO or through smaller partnerships. So I think the first step is just being aware of those things. And again, the most low cost effective way to do is just put yourself out there, start doing digital networking first, go to any of these online sessions. The one that's happening right now is also part of that. Just getting to know each other. I see almost like 50 participants here already. So how you can reach out to each other. And these things really matter and kind of help smaller NGOs get a sense of belonging also in the larger dev ecosystem.
Thank you, Samya, for that. Sort of, again, very practical, doable thing is to be aware of your opportunities and build your pipeline towards being a part of them and starting with building up to the events in your locality, in your city. Let me bring Gargi in here for her quick tip on what is a low cost approach according to you that organizations can adopt. I'll just help you with that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Aarti. So just a few low-cost approaches. I'll continue from where Samya said. I mean, virtual digital storytelling platforms, nowadays it's very much available. It's just that if you're working with very marginalized communities, then you need to create few, young people, who can access these virtual, digital. So we need to give them those skills, build those skills. The other is, I would say that please build some children, youth, or women advocates who can, like what Vithika said earlier, apni kahani khud ki zubani. So now, story, it's always better. It would be even better if they tell their story. It's always much more powerful. So how can we develop some youth advocates, some women or child advocates in that sense, and train them well? And the final is, collaborate with media. I mean, I get like innumerable calls from media, starting from Times of India to whatever. And I just use one example here, that in Chhattisgarh, on this girl child trafficking thing, I actually made best friends with the girl who was, now she's a very, senior journalist, and she also, actually attributes a lot of this to this whole thing of girl child trafficking, that she actually worked on. So you have to create those kind of friendships with media people who will take these issues and who will publish, who will talk about them, as well as, have some kind of a, like I said also earlier, some CSR, UN, people, persons whom you can actually, like Vithika said, mapping, so map your resources well, who's there in your vicinity, who's there in your state, who's there in your district, who is more approachable, seek an appointment. They may say no 2 3 4 times, but don't give up. So I really think these, follow up is like a must. I mean, coming from Childline, I always emphasize on follow up. So please don't give up. Have the patience, because all these stories from the grassroots are going like, to global platforms. So I'm sure, there's a long, NGOs have a long way to go. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gargi, again for not sharing just one tip, but a series of tips. And I think building relationships with media is also a recurring theme that we have been talking about, is to use their resources, their outreach power to bring your work to spotlight. Vithika, your take on this question.
I think there is stuff that we can learn from the trolls. I mean, think about it. They get after something on digital spaces and they don't leave it because they want the visibility. Of course, I'm not supporting trolls, but there are strategies that would work and work for good. So when you hear of forums where your representation you think is important, but you also know, look, we have to understand that historically, relationship or precedence means that donors will often default to larger organizations, and not just because they are biased, but also there is, from a financial perspective, there needs to be more administrative accountability, which they feel is much better with the larger NGOs and not with the smaller organizations. So when you're looking for visibility, you also have to understand there is a role for smaller organizations to ensure that they're trusted, they're taken seriously in terms of the money that might be invested, but also locally make your work visible. You hear of a forum and you want your work to be presented there because it is important. Talk about it on digital platforms, use the right hashtags, make it visible. Please be a part of local coalitions and organizations. Like Purpose is a great forum. What would stop local organizations from getting in touch with an organization like Purpose and saying that, what, this is what we do and we would like to have visibility for our work. And of course, Purpose will also do its own due diligence, which is very important, because if they are giving space to that story on their platform, they have to do their part of the work as well. But be at it. The more you invest in making your own story heard and making yourself more visible, higher chances of of someone noticing your work and saying that, okay, they're at it. And we all do that. I mean, even when we are looking for travel grants, which are often not there, we are after the organization saying that if you want us to be present there and we think we have an important thing to say, please help us with travel grants and what can be offered. How do we do that? I think Gargi also already mentioned, sometimes we do not realize that there might be local partnerships which can help with some of these representations. For example, at a local government level as well, if you know and you have mapped your partnerships well, you can actually, it's great for the local administration to know that somebody from their district is going to get visibility on a bigger forum. So what is in it for them? So sometimes it's also trying to find those linkages and trying to see what is a win-win situation in this for a given partner and how can they be invested in this. So yeah, some of those strategies.
Thank you, Vithika. You can learn something from everybody, and learning from trolls to get the visibility that we need is something that's going to stay with me. as a mantra forever. So thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our moderated discussion. And it's been fantastic to get your insights on all of these topics. We are a little bit running late in our schedule, but I will now open the floor for audience questions and hand over to my colleague Anamika, who's been curating the questions. And also thank you to our very active panelists on actually responding to some of the questions already. So Anamika, if you can bring up the selection of questions to the panel for the Q&A round. Over to you. Do we have Anamika on the call? Kavita, are you on the call? Would you be?
Got it.
Oh, okay.
I
Come.
wasn't, the host was not allowing me to unmute.
There is
So
some challenge in this call,
sometimes,
but yes. Over to you.
yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. So far, it has been really enlightening to hear all the different kind of stories from whatever you've built from your experiences. As I have been saying since last 3 days, that this is a lived classroom. We are sharing the stories, what you have lived on the ground, means hearing what Samya had shared, what worked with WCC and Gargi, with sharing with a lot of ground people being awarded, and also Vithika, how you have actually reached to that level where you are now becoming mentor for others also, I would say. So perhaps this is really good to see. I'd like to share some question, but before I start the asking the question from the chat, is there anybody who wants to raise their hand? Please feel free and we'll take the questions live as well. So my first question here is, this is Rashmi. Raja, I'm starting from the lower end. Do you suggest dedicated media like the Better India, IDR, any others would, what will work, or anything else that you might want to suggest? Is that right, Rashmi?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone can respond to this question, I guess. Any of the panelists?
I mean, I think I already added, some of the platforms like Youth Ki Awaaz and London Talk, which are great, in terms of really having locally resourced content and putting it out in a very conversational way, in a very impactful way out there. But I would actually also add that look at the local content creators. And then you have to be smart enough to also understand and differentiate between good content creators and not so good content creators. I don't mean this in a way that, no one is good, but I think when you want to put out good quality content, you also need to make wise choices in terms of who is that person. So understanding that and creating those kind of linkages or partnerships with local content creators in a variety of formats is extremely important.
Right. Anything else from Samya or Gargi? Otherwise, I'll move to the next question. And in the meantime, if anybody wants to raise their hand, please feel free. Okay, so there is another question coming from Devabrata. Before I go again to that question, is what can be the duration of the storytelling? Wow, that's a very interesting question. Anyone?
Samya, you should take that.
So Anamika, could you repeat that question?
What can be the duration of the storytelling? Means if somebody wants to tell the story, their grassroots story, what should be the duration? We always talk about 30 seconds, it's a time of attention. But actually, around what happens? Let's not talk about the reels.
Yeah, no, I think we should look at any story from, I think, more of a consistency point of view. So consider telling 10 stories versus telling one story well and doing that consistently. So I think that's something that's really important. A lot of the times, people keep sort of pivoting to different themes or sort of different narratives. But what really sticks is if you are consistently following up and building layers of storytelling, going deeper into the sort of human side of things again, and widening the impact. I think that's really important. So there's no sort of duration, but it's about more consistent and more long term storytelling is done. I think the effect of that is much, much higher.
Right, absolutely. And I think when we are talking about layering the stories, it also talks about how you are able to connect, the emotions in that, right? And that also gives a lot, but you need to keep patience for that. Yeah. Okay, and there is another question on the chat that says, what safeguards can we build to global engagement, strengthen not the global engagement that strengthens, not dilutes the local entity? It's a very important question, I guess. Maybe Vithika, this is more for a question for you. Like, how do you go global, but not dilute what actually you do on the ground? Your personal identity or the organization's grassroots identity doesn't get lost.
This is indeed a good question. I think it is more also to do with how strongly you put your values and principles out there with any partnership, right? So if that is very clear, then you also hold any partner accountable, and that really is the safeguard. The fact that you also hold the partner accountable, when they say that, these are our values and principles, and if you feel that is not in line with how your work has been shared or displayed out there, you can, hold them accountable. So I think, again, the most important thing is, I think, for local organizations to feel very confident of the work they are doing, and the responsibility lies on the ecosystem, so to say, to ensure that we hold these values in high regard. We are all aligned with it. It is important that the local identity or the work of the grassroots organizations is not misrepresented, and there is collective advocacy around it. And I think that's the collective advocacy, I think, is the most important safeguard in the long run.
Right. Thank you, Vithika. Any thoughts to add, Samya or Gargi? Perfect. I'll go for another question. Somebody has asked some time back, is that there are a lot of conversations around local. A lot of global organizations are now heading towards being local. What does it mean for the local grassroots organizations in that case, in that scenario? Because what I am seeing, like water aid is now water for people, water, something like that. They are changing the names. So organizations are also becoming local. And is it also impacting our, ground, our organization, the Indian grassroots organization in that sense? What's your thought? By the way, Vithika, this question was directed to you.
Sorry, what is the question again?
The question is, there are a lot of conversations around being local, right? And on the other side, the global organizations are becoming local, like a lot of Action Aid or Save the Children, Bal Raksha Trust or something like that. So what does it mean for us, small or medium-sized NGOs like us or grassroots organization in that sense? It is going to impact us.
Yeah. I think, again, it goes back to the fact that local organizations have to really make the best of this opportunity and say that, okay, now it's time for you to learn from us. So you come to us and we will, walk you along. So I think owning that space is extremely important, and telling them that, yes, you're more than welcome to learn from us, and we are here and we are going to learn from you. So I think owning that space is extremely important. And again, I think it is also important that this is beyond, the sort of a tokenistic approach. Just bigger organizations wanting to go that way because that's really the cool thing to say and know is something that also needs to be understood and called out on, things like that. I don't think it is fair that local, smaller organizations are always at a disadvantage because anything changes or anything, whatever the attention moves away from them. So I think owning it and having the confidence to own it is extremely important. And I always feel donors have a very, very important role to play. If there is one thing that needs to change, that is philanthropy. I think there is a big revolution needed in that space, and just much more authentic conversations.
Yeah, I love the word authentic because being authentic makes everything clear, right? Okay, so thank you, Vithika. There is one more question. I think given the time that we have, I'll take just one last question, which is for Samya. Are there any examples of storytelling formats like visual, short videos, infographics that have worked best on international audiences? Any thoughts?
I think the formats almost always, again, in the age that we live, is short video format. Videos capture the feel and the narrative really well and very quickly. But even beyond that, I think, again, being authentic, telling the story the way it feels like it's representing the people that it's supposed to really well. I think that's much more important. And the format becomes secondary always. But yeah, a focus on video work is definitely something that works across different platforms and different forums as well.
Right. So maybe videos, you mean the person who is telling the story should be telling it themselves rather than somebody else telling this. वही हमारी कहानी हमारी जुबानी का हिस्सा.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you. I'll not be able to take all the questions because of paucity of time, and we have come towards the end. So thank you very much, Vithika, Samya, and Gargi for responding to the questions and also on the chat very actively. Thank you so much. Over to you, Aarti.
Thank you very much, everyone, for answering those questions so engagingly and also doing a multitasking job of answering them on the chat and also answering them live. We are almost at the end. We are running over time. So we have shared a feedback form for the audience. We would love for you to share a quick feedback with us. It will help us improve on our future sessions. And in this time, I would like to thank all our panelists for joining us today, for taking out time, for sharing your experience, your insights, and also giving everybody who was listening some very practical insights into what would help organizations to tell their stories on national and global platforms, and also how they can think about it in a way where they don't feel small, but they think about the big impact or the sort of the big change they are bringing on the ground. So taking from what Gargi said is like, you are as small as you think and you're as big as the work that you're doing. So on that note, Vithika, Gargi, Samya, really heartfelt thank you for joining us today. Also, huge thanks to our audience for listening, for asking questions, and one last activity to please share your feedback form. And once you filled up the feedback form, I will bid you all good evening, and hopefully we'll all stay connected to keep having these conversations in the future. So thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Thank you, panelists.
Thank
and
you.
I'll say one last
Thank
point.
you.
Let's take our village to the global platforms.
And I just want to thank Development Consortium, all of you, for such an important discussion. And it was great to hear from Samya and Gargi. I think such powerful stories, and it also kind of is a reminder that we are all doing such important work in such an important space in the civil society world. So thank you so much. And I can only say that collective advocacy around who gets the mic is very, very important. So thank you for talking about it. And thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you, Vithika and Aarti, for having me on board. It was such a nice and a different kind of a discussion, so it was a pleasure. And also, Samya, it was really nice listening to you. So thanks and bye.
Absolutely.
Shall I take your leave?
Thank you and bye-bye. And we have 2 more panels in the coming days. I will share details with you. Please request anybody in your network to join us for more interesting, insightful conversations. But on that note, thank you and good evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Audience, please make sure you leave feedback before you leave. Thank you.